6 months after the breakup, the Duke saw her with a baby and realized it was his. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Fog pressed close to the glass as the carriage rolled through the Hertfordshire countryside. The horse's breath steamed in the chill morning air, and Edmund Hawthorne, Duke of Wetherby, leaned back against the seat, trying not to think. He had left London to escape politics and memory alike, but both clung to him like damp wool. 6 months had passed since he had last seen Lydia Clark, yet she lingered in his mind, quiet as the scent of lavender after rain. The coachman's voice broke through the rhythm of hooves. "Road ahead's too thick with mist, Your Grace. Best to stop at the next inn." Edmund agreed without much thought. The wheels slowed, crunching gravel, until a small timbered building appeared from the whiteness. A painted sign swung gently above the door. He stepped out, drawing his cloak tight. The air smelled of cold earth and wood smoke. It would be an unremarkable stop. One night, a meal, nothing more. Inside, warmth met him, and with it, the murmurs of early travellers. He handed his gloves to a servant and turned toward the fire. Then he saw her. Lydia stood by the hearth, speaking softly to the innkeeper's wife. Her shawl was plain, her posture straight. She looked older. No, not older, simply changed. There was a steadiness about her now, a quiet resolve that unsettled him more than any accusation could have. For a heartbeat, he thought he must be mistaken. But when she turned her head, when the light caught her profile, the same delicate line of the jaw, the same calm eyes, his heart faltered. He said her name before he could stop himself. Lydia. Her hand froze mid-motion. Slowly she turned. The expression that crossed her face was not surprise, but something heavier. Resignation, perhaps. "Your Grace," she said, the title soft, almost apologetic. "You're here." His voice was rough. "In Hertfordshire, of all places." She glanced toward the innkeeper, then back at him, just passing through. He took a step closer, uncertain whether to bow or stand still. The months apart unraveled inside him. All the reasons he had told himself, duty, rank, reputation, sounded hollow in the hush of that room. He opened his mouth to speak again, but the faintest sound interrupted him. A child's whimper. Lydia's arms shifted, and from beneath the folds of her shawl, a tiny face appeared, drowsy and content. Edmund stared. The world narrowed until there was only that child, that impossibly small creature resting against her shoulder. The infant blinked, as if curious about the tall stranger frozen in the middle of the room. The child's eyes were grey-blue, familiar as the reflection in Edmund's own mirror. Lydia adjusted the blanket. "You should not be here," she whispered. He took another step, voice unsteady. "Lydia, whose child is that?" For a moment she didn't answer. The fire crackled between them. Then she said quietly, "Mine." He searched her face, the tremor of her hands, the calm set of her mouth. "Yours." Yes. Something inside him, something carefully built of denial and pride, began to crumble. And the father? Her eyes lifted to his, and the silence that followed told him everything. He drew a breath that felt like it scraped his lungs. "You never wrote." "I could not," she said. "It would have ruined you." "I ruined myself long before this," he murmured. 6 months, Lydia. You vanished without a word. I left because there was nothing else to do. You said we were finished. I believed you." He wanted to speak, to deny it, but memory struck too sharply. The night he'd sent her away, his voice cold while his heart begged to keep her. "I was trying to protect you." From what? From love? From gossip? She shook her head, holding the baby closer. "You were protecting yourself." The words landed with the weight of truth. He had no defense. The innkeeper's wife approached, cheerful and unaware. "Would His Grace care for breakfast? We've mutton stew." Lydia interrupted quickly. "Please, Mrs. Pratt, we're fine." Edmund forced a smile and declined the offer. The woman nodded and left them in uneasy quiet. He looked again at the child. "What is his name?" Her expression softened, just a fraction. "Thomas." "Thomas," Edmund repeated, tasting the sound. "He's 6 months old?" She nodded. He did the arithmetic silently. 6 months since she'd left Wetherby Hall. 6 months since their last night together. He ran a hand through his hair. "You mean to tell me I have a son I knew nothing of?" Lydia's shoulders tightened. You have nothing to do with it, Edmund. You made your choice. I will not drag you into mine." He laughed under his breath, half bitter, half in awe. "Do you think that's possible? To look at him and pretend he's no part of me?" "You must," she said, "for his sake." He stepped closer, and she didn't move this time. "For his sake, he deserves the truth, and so do I." "The truth," she said quietly, "would destroy you. Then let it." His voice rose before he caught himself. A few heads turned. He lowered it again. "Let it, Lydia. I can bear scandal. I cannot bear losing my own child." Her gaze softened, yet sorrow lingered there. "You say that now, but when your peers whisper, when Parliament mocks the Duke who could not keep his household in order, I no longer care about their laughter." "You do," she said. "You always did." He flinched. She was right. Every instinct in him had been shaped by expectation. His family, his name, the long corridor of ancestors staring down from their portraits. But standing there, watching her rock their child, he wondered when duty had become another word for cowardice. Lydia turned away, speaking as if to herself. "I should go before the road closes with fog again." "Where will you go?" "Somewhere you will not find me." He reached for her arm, then stopped himself. "At least allow me to help. You shouldn't travel alone with a child." Her laugh was short, not unkind. "Do you think I've had help these past months?" "No," he said quietly. "But you shouldn't have been forced to manage without it." She faced him again, and for the first time, he saw fatigue shadowing her eyes. Yet there was pride too, the same stubborn strength that had first drawn him to her. He spoke more gently. "Lydia, please, I know I have no right, but—" "Exactly," she said, cutting him off. "You have no right. Go back to your world, Edmund. Leave mine alone." Before he could answer, the baby stirred and whimpered. She hushed him, her voice soft and soothing, and Edmund fell silent. He'd never heard anything so intimate. He wanted to hold the child, to feel proof of what he already knew. But he also knew Lydia would not allow it, not now. "I'll stay the night here," he said finally. "We can speak again in the morning." She shook her head. "There's nothing left to say." "There is everything left to say." Her lips parted as if to reply, but she stopped. The innkeeper entered, clearing his throat. "Your Grace, I've arranged your room. Mrs. Clark's is just above, if you should require anything." Edmund looked at him sharply. "Mrs. Clark?" The man smiled, oblivious. "Yes, sir. She's been renting here for near 3 weeks. Fine guest, keeps to herself. We were pleased to hear you'd be stopping by again." Edmund froze. "Again?" The innkeeper nodded cheerfully. "Why, yes, sir. Your letter arrived 2 days past, reserving our best chamber. Mrs. Clark said you'd likely want the room across from hers, and we obliged." Lydia's face drained of colour. "I never wrote such a letter," she said quickly. The innkeeper looked puzzled. "Strange, that. Came signed with your name, Your Grace. Same seal and all." Edmund felt the air shift. Someone had arranged this meeting. Someone who knew both their names, both their pasts. He turned back to Lydia. She clutched Thomas protectively, eyes wide with fear. Outside, the fog pressed closer against the windows, thick as secrets. And Edmund realized with sudden clarity that he was not the only one who had found her. The inn seemed smaller the next morning, its walls holding too many secrets. Edmund had barely slept. He paced the length of his chamber until dawn, trying to make sense of the letter that had brought him there. Someone wanted him and Lydia to meet again. Someone who knew enough to imitate his seal. Downstairs, the smell of bread and damp wood filled the air. Lydia was already awake, sitting near the window with Thomas in her lap. The child played with a piece of string, unaware of the tension between his parents. She looked up when Edmund approached, her expression guarded. "We need to talk," he said. Her answer was calm. "We said all that mattered last night." "You said it. I didn't agree to it." He sat across from her. "Someone forged my letter, Lydia. That means we were meant to meet. Someone knew about you. Then you should leave before whoever it is learns you're here, and leave you for them to find. They won't trouble me. I'm no one to them." He shook his head. "You underestimate the malice of curiosity. A woman alone with a child that resembles a duke. It is more than gossip. It is blood for the newspapers." Her eyes met his, steady and proud. "I have lived with whispers before. I can live with them again. You shouldn't have to." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Let me take you somewhere safe. I'm safe enough here. He wanted to believe her, but he could feel eyes on them even as they spoke. A farmer eating his breakfast pretended to read a paper, yet his gaze drifted too often toward their table. Mrs. Pratt moved about refilling cups, listening with polite disinterest that was not entirely genuine. Lydia sensed it too. She stood abruptly. I'll go upstairs. Thomas needs rest. He rose as well. We are not finished. She turned halfway up the stairs, her tone softening. You're not listening, Edmund. We can never be finished. That's the truth you refuse to see. He watched her disappear down the hall. Her steps were light, but his heart felt heavier than ever. A man at the counter nodded toward him. Fine boy, that one, he said with a grin. Looks like his father, don't he? Edmund forced a faint smile, then left the room before his composure failed him. By noon, the inn buzzed with low conversation. Travellers came and went, but the locals stayed, eager for entertainment. Rumours grew faster than weeds. Mrs. Pratt's voice carried from the kitchen to the common room. She's a sweet young mother, that Lydia, but no husband about. And his Grace staying under the same roof, it makes one wonder. Mr. Pratt hushed her, but not before a guest heard and repeated the tale to another. Within an hour the story had taken new shape. The Duke had hidden a mistress and child in Hertfordshire. Edmund found out from the stable boy, who came to him wide-eyed. Beg pardon, your Grace, but folk are talking strange. Say you've come to fetch your lady and her babe. The Duke's jaw tightened. Who told you that? Everyone, sir. He dismissed the boy and strode toward Lydia's room. When she opened the door, he didn't wait to be invited in. They're talking already, he said. Your name's being tossed around like a market tale. I warned you, she replied. This is what your presence brings. He closed the door sharply. Then let me end it. Come with me to London. You'll have protection, privacy. I'll arrange a home for you and the boy. And be kept as your secret? Her voice was low but shaking. No, Edmund, I won't raise him in shadows. You think I want that? What else could there be? You would never claim him openly, not with your family, not with your title. His hands curled at his sides. You believe I'm so cowardly? I believe you're bound to the life you were born to, and that life cannot include us. He looked toward the cradle where Thomas slept, tiny fingers clutching a piece of cloth. Then what will you do? Run until the next village hears a different story? If I must. He crossed the room, lowering his voice. And when they ask for the father's name? When the child grows and wonders who he is? She swallowed hard but said nothing. Edmund's voice softened. Lydia, I cannot change the past, but I can choose differently now. You can't, she whispered, and you shouldn't. I'll not let your name burn for me. There was a knock at the door. Mrs. Pratt's voice came through, too polite to be casual. Pardon, miss, there's a fine lady here to see his Grace. Says she's travelled from London. Lydia's head turned sharply. Who? Mrs. Pratt hesitated. Lady Beatrice Ashcombe, ma'am. Lydia froze. Edmund's stomach sank. He hadn't seen Beatrice in weeks, but her arrival here could only mean one thing. Rumour had reached the capital. He opened the door. Show her to the parlour, Mrs. Pratt. The innkeeper's wife bobbed a curtsy and left. Edmund turned to Lydia. Stay here. Don't come down until I send for you. She gave a small, bitter smile. You think she doesn't already know? He said nothing, and that silence was answer enough. When he entered the parlour, Lady Beatrice stood near the fireplace, elegant as ever, her travelling cloak spotless despite the road. She greeted him with perfect calm. Edmund, I confess I did not expect to find you in such surroundings. He forced civility. To what do I owe this visit? Concern, she said lightly. I hear strange things whispered in London. A woman, a child, a duke playing the fool. You should not believe gossip. I believe what I see, and I saw a carriage at the door with your crest. She moved closer, her tone turning cold. Tell me it isn't true. Tell me that girl upstairs isn't the same governess who disappeared from your house 6 months ago. His answer came slowly. It is Lydia Clark. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. Then the rest of the tale follows easily. I only wonder, does the child bear your name? He met her gaze steadily. The child bears no one's name yet. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'll give. She laughed softly, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, Edmund, you always fancied yourself honourable, but you never understood the world you live in. This will destroy you. Every invitation withdrawn, every alliance dissolved. They'll say you've lost your senses over a servant." "Enough," he said sharply. She tilted her head. "If you cared for your family's future, you'd end this nonsense at once. I could help you." I could see the whispers silenced. "By what means?" "Marry me," she said simply. "Let the world believe the gossip was false, a cruel fabrication. I'll make them forget her name." He stared at her, astonished by the calmness with which she offered herself as a solution. "You speak as though people are ledgers to be balanced." "They are," she said quietly. "And if you don't start thinking so, you'll lose everything. I have already lost what mattered." Her composure flickered. "You mean her?" "Yes." For the first time, anger cracked through her poise. "Then you are a fool. She'll ruin you without lifting a finger. Do you think society will pity a woman who overreached? They'll call her ambitious, cunning, and you, weak." He turned away. "You mistake me for someone who fears their judgment. Then you'll face it alone." She swept past him toward the door, then paused. "But remember this. Rumors grow roots. By tomorrow, every gentleman in Parliament will know the Duke of Wetherby has a bastard son." She left before he could answer. Edmund stood still for a long moment. The fire hissed, and the sound of voices drifted from the hall. The whisper he'd feared had already become a storm. When he returned upstairs, Lydia was waiting, her shawl drawn tightly. She was here, wasn't she? "Yes." "What did she say?" "Enough to ruin us both." Lydia closed her eyes briefly. "Then I must leave tonight." He stepped forward. "You can't vanish again." "I have to. She'll go straight to London with this. If she speaks your name with mine, the rest will follow. I'll stop her. You can't stop her tongue, but you can save yourself if you let me go." He shook his head. "No." "Then Thomas will pay the price." The name cut through his resistance. He looked at the sleeping baby and knew she was right. Lydia began to gather her things. Small clothes, a few coins, the shawl she'd worn since winter. Her movements were quick, almost frantic. Edmund tried to help, but she refused every offer. "I'll find another town," she said, "maybe further north. I'll change my name again." He caught her hand. "Lydia, listen to me." "No." Her voice broke. "You had your chance to fight for us before. You didn't. Don't try now when it's too late." The words burned through him. He let her go. She lifted Thomas into her arms, kissed his forehead, and looked once more at Edmund. "Please, don't follow me. Tell me at least where you'll go." "I don't know yet." He watched her walk to the door, her figure dissolving into the mist beyond the threshold. The sound of her footsteps faded until only silence remained. An hour later, when he finally forced himself to leave the inn, Mrs. Pratt handed him a folded scrap of paper. "She asked me to give you this, Your Grace." He unfolded it. The writing was hurried, almost trembling. "Do not follow me. Protect your name." He closed his eyes, grief and anger warring in his chest. Then the innkeeper called to him from the stable, holding something in his hand. "Found this tucked under her shawl, sir. Thought it might be yours." Edmund took it, puzzled. It was another note, the paper finer, the ink precise. He opened it and read a single sentence, signed with an elegant hand he recognized at once. "You should have told me the truth before I found it myself." The road from Hertfordshire stretched endlessly, and Edmund's carriage rolled through the mist with no clear destination. The note from Beatrice burned in his pocket. She knew. She had known enough to forge his seal, enough to lure him there. He could imagine her calm satisfaction, already weaving her web back in London. Lydia had fled again, and every mile between them felt like punishment. He stopped at the next posting inn and questioned every stable hand, every merchant passing through. No one had seen a young woman with a child. She was vanishing again, melting into the countryside like morning fog. By the third day, exhaustion took him. He returned to Wetherby Hall, but the silence of the great house was worse than the open road. His mother greeted him in the drawing-room, eyes sharp behind her spectacles. "You've been travelling," she said, "and in questionable company, I hear." "From whom did you hear that?" he asked, though he already knew. "Lady Beatrice was kind enough to express concern. She says you've been seen in Hertfordshire with a woman of rustic background." "Then Beatrice should mind her own affairs." The Duchess's expression did not change. "She's a loyal friend, Edmund. She cares about appearances. You might remember that such things matter for a man of your position." He forced a thin smile. Appearances have always mattered more than truth in this family. Her voice cooled. You've grown reckless. I suggest you end this rural adventure before it becomes gossip. It already is gossip, he muttered, and left the room before she could reply. Days passed with no letter, no sign of Lydia. He searched the directories of nearby towns, paid messengers to inquire at coaching stations, even sent word to a discreet investigator in London. Nothing. She was gone, as if the earth had swallowed her. Meanwhile, in a small village 2 counties north, Lydia Clark awoke to the sound of church bells and a baby's laughter. The cottage she had rented was modest, its roof patched, its hearth small. Yet for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to peace. She worked long hours for a dressmaker, her fingers raw from stitching, but her heart lighter knowing Thomas slept safely beside her. Still, the fear never left. At every knock, she flinched. At every new face, she wondered who might have been sent to find her. One afternoon, a merchant arrived from the south selling ribbons and fabric scraps. His chatter filled the shop where Lydia worked. "You'll never believe the talk in Hertfordshire," he said, leaning over the counter. "A duke visiting an inn where a young woman was staying. They say she had a baby, and that the child looked remarkably like him." The seamstress laughed, amused by the scandal. "People will say anything." Lydia kept her head down, pretending to mend a hem. But the merchant went on, lowering his voice. "Some say the lady disappeared the next day, that the Duke's sweetheart was hiding a secret child. London's already buzzing." Her hand trembled so sharply that the needle pricked her skin. A drop of blood stained the fabric. The seamstress frowned. "Careful, Lydia." "I'm sorry," she murmured, wrapping her finger. Her heart pounded. If London knew, Beatrice had spoken. And if Beatrice had spoken, Edmund would be dragged through ruin. That evening, Lydia walked to the edge of the village, the air cool with early spring. Thomas slept against her shoulder, his breath steady. She whispered to him, "I won't let them find you. I won't let them use you against him." When she returned to the cottage, she found the landlord waiting outside, holding a folded paper. "Came by post for you, miss?" She hesitated. "From where?" "London, I think. Fine wax seal. Must be someone important." She thanked him, took the letter and closed the door behind her. The seal bore no crest, only an initial, B. Her stomach twisted. She broke it open and read quickly. "You can run, Miss Clark, but society is smaller than you think. Sooner or later, truth finds its audience. Consider what is best for the child and for the Duke, before others make that choice for you." There was no signature, but she didn't need one. The next morning, Lydia packed again. The seamstress begged her to stay. "You're the best hand I've got." But she couldn't risk it. With a small purse of coins and a single trunk, she boarded a northbound coach. She prayed each stop would carry her farther from London's whispers. But fate, as ever, was less merciful. 2 days later, Edmund received word from his investigator. "Your Grace, a woman matching Miss Clark's description was seen in a northern market town, travelling with a child, under the name Mrs. Turner. He left that night. The coach rocked through rain and mud, but he didn't care. He only knew he had to reach her before Beatrice or her spies did. When he arrived, the town square was bustling. Vendors called out their wares, and children chased each other between stalls. He searched faces until he saw her, across the cobbled street, standing by a merchant's cart. She looked thinner, the circles under her eyes darker, but she was unmistakably Lydia. He called her name. She froze, then turned. Their eyes met, and everything else disappeared. The crowd, the noise, the rain. She didn't speak, didn't even breathe. Then she lifted Thomas higher in her arms and began to walk away. He caught up in 2 strides, stepping in front of her. "You've no reason to run," he said. "I have every reason," she answered. "You shouldn't be here." "Lydia, please. You can't keep vanishing like this." "I can, if it keeps him safe." "Safe from what? From me? From your world?" He looked down at the child, who blinked up at him with quiet curiosity. "You can't do this alone. Let me help you." "Help me how? By making me the ruin of a duke?" He lowered his voice. "I don't care about ruin anymore." "Then you've learned nothing," she said bitterly. He tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back. "Go home, Edmund. You have no place here. I'll not leave you again." Her tone softened, tired rather than angry. Then you'll destroy yourself for nothing. Before he could answer, a voice called his name. Your Grace! And he turned to see one of his own servants pushing through the crowd. The man looked flustered. Forgive me, sir. Lady Beatrice sent word. She's asking for you in London. Urgent matters, she said. Lydia's face drained of colour. She's still watching you. She watches everything, he said grimly. But I won't let her near you. She already is near, Lydia whispered. How else would you have found me? He realised then that she was right. His investigator worked through London contacts. Beatrice could have known every step. He cursed under his breath. Lydia adjusted the blanket around Thomas. I must go before she sends someone else. Lydia, wait. But she was already moving, her pace quickening. He followed through the market until she turned down a narrow alley between the shops. When he reached the end, she was gone. Only the faint echo of her steps remained. He stood there for a long time, rain dripping from the eaves. Then he noticed something near a doorway, a small shawl damp with mud. He picked it up, recognizing the pattern. Her shawl. She must have dropped it in haste. As he unfolded it, a folded note fell out, dry despite the rain. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. You should have told me the truth before I found it myself, the first note had said. This one was shorter. I warned you once. Now everyone knows. Edmund's breath caught. The wax seal at the bottom bore Beatrice's full name. He closed his fist around the paper, rain washing over his gloves. She had gone too far. When he reached the inn to rest his horses, the gossip had already arrived ahead of him. Two gentlemen at a table whispered loudly enough for him to hear. The Duke of Wetherby, they say, fathered a child with a governess. Quite the scandal. The lady's vanished, poor thing. The Duchess must be livid. He turned away before they noticed him, fury burning behind his composed face. That night he sat alone by the hearth, the shawl folded beside him. His mind raced through possibilities, how to shield Lydia, how to silence Beatrice, how to undo what was already loose in the world. There was no way to erase it now. At dawn, he set out again, determined to find Lydia first. Meanwhile, Lydia, now several towns away, sat in a small room above a bakery, rocking Thomas to sleep. She had no news yet, but something in her chest told her the whispers had reached London. She had seen the look in Edmund's eyes before he disappeared in the rain, guilt and fear. Both meant the same thing. Beatrice had won. The baker's wife knocked softly at her door. Mrs. Turner, you have a visitor. Says he knows your husband. Lydia froze. I have no husband, she said, voice barely audible. The woman frowned. That's odd. He was certain. Said he once worked for a duke. Lydia's blood ran cold. She held Thomas tighter and moved toward the back window. Tell him I'm not here. But before the baker's wife could answer, a man's voice called from the hall, deep and polite. Mrs. Turner, forgive the intrusion. My master wishes to ensure your safety. She didn't recognize the voice, but the words chilled her more than threats would have. She knew whose servant that would be. Beatrice's. She lifted the latch on the window, heart pounding. Behind her, the doorknob turned slowly. And as the door began to open, a hand reached through the crack of light, holding a letter sealed in red wax. Lydia stared at the red seal, her breath caught between fear and disbelief. The servant's hand remained in the doorway, patient, almost courteous. It is from Lady Ashcombe, he said. She requests a meeting, madam. She assures you it concerns only your safety. I want nothing from her, Lydia answered. Tell your mistress that. The man bowed slightly. I am to deliver it whether you read it or not. He placed the letter on the small table by the door and stepped back. She waits at the coach house down the lane. She said you would understand that refusing her could be unwise. Lydia did not answer. She shut the door and stood still, listening until his footsteps faded. Then she crossed the room, staring at the seal, a perfect impression of the Ashcombe crest. She knew what Beatrice wanted. Power always came dressed as politeness. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the paper. Miss Clark, you cannot continue like this. I am offering you a choice. Meet me once, and I will see that you and your child are left in peace. Refuse, and I cannot promise others will be as merciful. B.A. Lydia sank into the chair, the letter shaking in her hands. She looked at Thomas asleep in his cradle, his lips parted in a tiny sigh. The choice was clear. She could not risk harm coming to him. She would go briefly, carefully, and end whatever Beatrice had begun. At dusk, she left the child in the baker's care and walked to the coach house. The smell of hay and damp earth filled the air. Inside, a single lantern burned, and Lady Beatrice stood waiting, dressed in travelling clothes, far too fine for such a place. "Miss Clark," she said smoothly, "how punctual. I confess, I doubted you'd have the courage." Lydia's voice was calm. "I came because you mentioned my child." Beatrice smiled faintly. "Ah yes, he's a lovely boy, they say. So like his father." Lydia straightened her shoulders. "Say what you came to say, Lady Ashcombe." "Very well. You and I both know Edmund's sense of duty will destroy him. If the world believes that child to be his position will crumble. You might be proud enough to face disgrace, but he cannot. You will ruin him." Lydia met her gaze steadily. "You underestimate him." Beatrice's smile sharpened. "I know him better than you think. He cannot bear scandal. He was raised to fear it more than sin itself, and yet here you are, parading his downfall in swaddling clothes. I've paraded nothing. I've hidden for months." "Yes, but people talk. They've already connected your absence with his. The story spreads by the hour." Lydia folded her arms. "Then what do you want from me?" Beatrice stepped closer, her tone turning soft. "An arrangement. Leave England quietly. France, perhaps. I will see you provided for, discreetly, of course. A small house, funds for the child. You need never worry again." Lydia's stomach turned. "Bought silence. Call it protection," Beatrice said. "Everyone wins. You, the child, even Edmund." "And you?" Beatrice's eyes glinted. "I lose nothing." Lydia shook her head. "He will see through it. He already knows who you are." Beatrice laughed lightly. "Oh, my dear, he knows nothing. Men like Edmund never see what stands in front of them. They're too busy chasing honor to recognize manipulation. He will accept my version of events soon enough." "What version is that?" "That you pursued him, that you threatened him, that the child's father is unknown and you seek to trap a nobleman into claiming it." Lydia felt her breath catch. "You would slander me so easily." "It will not be slander once it is repeated often enough," Beatrice replied. "Truth is merely a matter of who speaks first." Lydia stared at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You may ruin me, but not him. I won't let you." Beatrice's brows lifted. "And how do you intend to stop me?" Lydia's voice trembled only slightly. "By leaving now before you can use us. You cannot spread what you cannot prove." Beatrice regarded her with something like admiration. "Clever girl. But you forget. I already have proof. The innkeeper's wife, the letters, the timing of your child's birth. That is enough to poison a man's name." Lydia turned away, forcing herself to keep calm. "Then do as you please. I will protect my son. That is all that matters." "You'll find it difficult to protect him when you have nowhere left to hide," Beatrice said softly. "And make no mistake, Miss Clark, I always find what I seek." Lydia walked out before she could answer. The air outside was sharp, and her hands trembled as she pulled her shawl tighter. She did not look back, but she felt Beatrice's gaze follow her all the way down the lane. The next morning, Edmund was already on the road to London. He had learned of the spreading rumours, newspapers hinting at scandal, letters arriving from his peers, inquiries from Parliament associates. His mother's disappointment had turned to icy command. "You must deny it publicly," she said. "Lady Ashcombe has prepared a statement to protect the family." He had refused, of course, but refusal changed nothing. The story was loose, and silence would be taken as confession. When he arrived at his townhouse, Beatrice was waiting in the drawing room, sipping tea as though she owned the place. "Edmund," she said pleasantly, "you look weary. Travelling again, I suppose." "Enough of this," he said, closing the door. "You've gone too far." Her brows arched. "Have I? You forged my letter, sent word to that inn, followed Lydia across counties. You've turned her life into a scandal for your amusement." "For your rescue," she corrected him. "You cannot see what you've become. I am saving you from ruin. By destroying her, by removing temptation. You'll thank me one day." He stepped closer, his voice low with anger. "If you ever speak her name again—" She cut him off with a thin smile. "You'll what? Challenge me? You cannot silence me, Edmund. But you can join me. Marry me, and this entire matter disappears." He laughed once, bitterly. You think I'd buy my freedom with a lie? You'd be buying your legacy, she said. Your seat in Parliament, your name in every social register that matters. All you have to do is declare the child a fabrication. And what becomes of Lydia? She leaves the country, as she should have months ago. And you would ensure that? I already have, Beatrice said. She agreed to meet me. I gave her an opportunity to vanish before worse befell her. If she's wise, she's gone by now. For a moment he could not speak. Then he said quietly, You've made an enemy of me. Then you will lose, she replied. Because I do not lose. He turned from her and left the room before the fury in him found words he could never retract. By the time he reached his carriage, his mind was set. He would find Lydia again, whatever the cost. He travelled through the night, back toward the northern villages. It was dawn when he arrived at the bakery where she had last lodged. The baker's wife looked startled to see a nobleman at her door. Mrs. Turner left 2 days ago, she said. Didn't say where she was bound, just left this behind. She handed him a small piece of paper. It was Lydia's handwriting, hurried and brief. Do not seek me. It is safer if you let me go. He closed his eyes. Did anyone come for her before she left? Yes, the woman said. A servant in a fine coat. He said he worked for a lady from London. Beatrice again. Of course. He thanked her and mounted his horse. Every turn of the road was heavy with dread. If Beatrice had men searching, Lydia would not stay hidden for long. Meanwhile, Lydia reached the outskirts of York by evening. She had walked most of the way, too afraid to use her real name at any inn. Thomas slept fitfully in her arms, his little head tucked beneath her chin. She found a small cottage to rent for the night, grateful for the quiet. As she fed the child, she told herself that Edmund would survive this. He had always known how to endure the storms of society. She would bear the rest alone. But solitude brought new danger. At midnight, she heard voices outside the window, men's voices, rough and low. One said, She's in there. The woman with the babe. Orders are to keep her till the lady arrives. Lydia's heart thudded. She blew out the lamp, gathered Thomas, and slipped toward the back door. But the latch rattled before she reached it. A knock followed, sharp, deliberate. Mrs. Turner, a man called. We mean no harm. Lady Ashcombe wishes to speak with you again. Lydia froze. The baby stirred and whimpered. She whispered, Hush, my love. The knock came again, harder this time. Open the door. She backed away, clutching Thomas to her chest. A moment later, the window shutter creaked open, and a sliver of lantern light fell across the floor. Lydia's breath caught. Someone was already climbing through. The shutter banged against the wall as a man's boot crossed the sill. Lydia stepped back, clutching Thomas so tightly that he whimpered in protest. The lantern light caught the intruder's face. Plain, ordinary, but his eyes were sharp and cold. Stay where you are, he said. Who are you? She demanded, her voice shaking. Only a messenger, ma'am. Lady Ashcombe asked that I escort you to her carriage. You're not safe here. I won't go anywhere with you. Best not to argue. He took another step inside. There are others outside. You'll only frighten the babe. Lydia glanced toward the door. Shadows moved beyond it. There were indeed others. She turned toward the back of the cottage, but another man appeared there too, his face hidden under a hood. She whispered, Please let us go. No harm meant, the first man said, lowering his lantern. But the lady insists. Before he could move again, a sharp knock sounded from the front of the cottage, louder, commanding. Open in the name of his grace, the Duke of Wetherby. The intruder froze. What? The door burst open before he finished. Edmund stood framed in the doorway, rain streaming from his coat, eyes blazing. Touch her, and you'll regret it. The man hesitated, then lunged toward the window. Edmund caught his arm and drove him back against the wall. The lantern fell, sputtering. Who sent you? Edmund demanded. The second man bolted through the back door, disappearing into the dark. The first struggled, gasping. No harm meant, we were told to fetch her. By whom? Lady Ashcombe. Lydia pressed herself against the cradle, whispering to Thomas to stay calm. Edmund released the man, who stumbled to the door and fled after his companion. For a moment the cottage was silent except for the sound of the rain. Edmund turned to her, breathing hard. Are you hurt? She shook her head. You shouldn't have come. If I hadn't, they would have taken you. You don't know that. I know Beatrice, he said. I know what she's capable of. He crossed the room in 2 strides, taking her free hand. You can't stay here, Lydia. She'll keep hunting you until she's satisfied she's destroyed you. Or me. She looked down at Thomas. Then what choice do we have? He hesitated, then said, Come with me to London. She gave a bitter laugh. Back to the city that despises me. I'll protect you. You can't even protect yourself. Then we'll fall together, he said quietly. But at least I'll fall knowing the truth is mine to defend. Her eyes met his, uncertain but searching. The sincerity in his voice struck something deep in her chest. He continued, There's a carriage outside. We'll travel tonight. My mother's physician keeps a house in Kensington. Quiet, trustworthy. No one will know you're there. She looked away. You think hiding in one of your houses will stop her? She has power, influence. So do I, he said. And I've wasted it long enough. Let me use it for something that matters. Thomas stirred, and Lydia hushed him gently. If I agree, you must promise one thing, she said. Promise you won't face her alone. He hesitated. I can't promise that. Then we go nowhere. He sighed, frustration breaking through his composure. You're the most impossible woman I've ever known. And yet you came for me, she said softly. He smiled despite himself. Yes, I came for you. They left before dawn, the road slick with mud, the air thick with fog. Lydia sat in the carriage beside him, silent for much of the journey. Thomas slept in her arms, his small breaths the only sound between them. Near sunrise, Edmund broke the silence. When I first saw you at Wetherby Hall, I never imagined this. You standing in defiance of half of England. I never imagined you would break so easily to their judgment, she said quietly. He winced. I deserve that. She looked down at Thomas. You were kind once. Kind enough to see beyond my place. That's why it hurt when you stopped. He turned toward her. It wasn't kindness that stopped. It was courage. Her gaze softened. Then find it again, Edmund. For his sake. The carriage rattled through the city streets by afternoon. London loomed grey and vast, the noise of horses and wheels rising through the mist. Edmund guided them to the physician's townhouse, where a discreet servant took them in through a side door. Dr. Linton, an old friend of Edmund's late father, greeted them gravely. You ask for secrecy, Your Grace. Yes. No one must know they're here. Lydia's hands tightened on the blanket. Not even your mother, especially not her, he replied. Dr. Linton nodded and showed them to a small set of rooms overlooking a narrow garden. You'll be safe here, he said. The staff are loyal. When the doctor left, Lydia stood by the window, watching the fog drift between rooftops. Safe, she murmured. You believe such a thing exists for people like us? I have to, he said. Days passed in uneasy calm. Lydia cared for Thomas while Edmund made careful inquiries through trusted allies. Rumours continued to spread, some claiming the child was his, others insisting Beatrice had invented the entire tale to ruin him. The newspapers danced around the scandal without naming names, but everyone knew. One evening Edmund returned late, his coat damp with rain. She's preparing something, he said. An announcement, perhaps. She's been seen at every salon in Mayfair, whispering to anyone who will listen. Lydia looked up from Thomas's cradle. Then it's only a matter of time. I won't let her win. How will you stop her? He hesitated, then said, By facing her. I told you not to go alone. I won't, he promised. You'll be with me. Me? She shook her head. They'll tear us apart in public. Let them try. I've lived my life pretending to be a man of principle. It's time I become one. She searched his face, seeing the determination there. And what if she exposes everything? Then the world will know the truth, her voice dropped to a whisper, and the truth will destroy you. Perhaps, he said, but I'd rather be ruined for honesty than praised for a lie. That night she couldn't sleep. She watched the city lights flicker beyond the window, the sound of distant carriages echoing down the street. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life free of running, a life where Thomas could bear his father's name without shame. In the morning, Edmund brought word that a public gathering would be held at Lord Pembroke's estate that evening. Beatrice will be there, he said. It's the centre of her world. If she intends to destroy us, that's where she'll begin. Lydia's heart pounded. Then we mustn't go. That's exactly Why, we must. She shook her head. Edmund, think. They'll see me and know at once. I can't face them. He took her hand gently. You faced far worse when you chose to keep our child. She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But whatever happens, you speak first. That evening, the great hall of Pembroke House shimmered with chandeliers and murmurs. The air was heavy with perfume and speculation. Edmund entered with Lydia on his arm, her plain gown modest but spotless, her head held high. The room fell silent. Beatrice stood near the staircase, her expression one of poised surprise. My, she said, her voice carrying just enough for all to hear. The Duke brings company. How unconventional. Edmund's tone was calm, but unyielding. You've been busy, Beatrice. Half of London speaks our names, though few understand the truth. She smiled coolly. Enlighten us, then. Lydia's pulse thudded in her ears. The eyes of the room were knives. Edmund said clearly, The woman you call Scandal is Lydia Clark. She was once governess to my sister, and she is the mother of my son. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Beatrice's face remained a mask, but her hand tightened on her fan. You admit it, then? I do. Beatrice laughed softly. You've doomed yourself. Perhaps, Edmund said. But I won't doom them with silence. Lydia's knees trembled. Edmund's voice was steady, his gaze never leaving Beatrice. You used deceit to tear apart a woman's life. You sent men to hunt her, forged letters in my name, and spread lies for your own vanity. You've mistaken cruelty for love and ambition for truth. Beatrice's mask slipped for an instant, her eyes flashing. You'll regret those words. No, he said. I regret only that I once thought you capable of kindness. The murmurs grew louder. Lydia could feel the room turning, sympathy mingling with fascination. Beatrice's composure began to fracture. I think you've won their pity. You think this confession will save you? It's not pity I want, he said, only peace. For a moment, Beatrice said nothing. Then she turned sharply toward the door. You've chosen your ruin, Edmund. May you both enjoy it. The door slammed behind her. Lydia exhaled shakily. Edmund took her hand, his fingers warm against hers. Around them, the whispers swelled like a tide. He leaned closer and said quietly, It's done. But before she could reply, a servant hurried into the hall, pale and breathless. He bowed quickly to Edmund and whispered something urgent in his ear. Edmund's expression changed at once. What is it? Lydia asked. He looked toward her, alarm flashing in his eyes. The Duchess has summoned us to Wetherby House immediately. Rain began to fall as the carriage rolled toward Wetherby House, the wheels cutting through shallow pools of water that reflected the lantern light. Inside, Lydia sat beside Edmund, clutching the edge of the seat to keep her hands from trembling. Thomas had been left with Dr. Linton's housekeeper, safe for the moment, but the thought of him alone tightened her chest. Neither of them spoke for most of the journey. Edmund's jaw was set, his gaze fixed on the fogged window. Lydia watched him from the corner of her eye, wishing she could read the thoughts behind that calm face. When they arrived, the great iron gates of Wetherby stood open, a line of lamps lighting the path to the entrance. The Duchess was waiting in the grand hall, her posture straight as a ruler. Behind her stood 2 footmen, and, to Lydia's shock, Lady Beatrice Ashcombe. Beatrice's smile was faint but triumphant. You've caused quite a scene, Edmund, she said softly. The Duchess turned her gaze on Lydia. Miss Clark, you may wait in the parlour. I wish to speak to my son alone. I have nothing to hide, Lydia said, her voice quiet but firm. Whatever must be said can be said in front of me. The Duchess raised one perfectly arched brow. You forget yourself, madam. Mother, Edmund interrupted, this matter concerns her as much as me. She stays. The Duchess's lips thinned, but she nodded once. Very well. If you insist on bringing disgrace under my roof, we will not hide it behind closed doors. They entered the drawing-room. The fire was already lit, the air heavy with the scent of wood smoke and tension. The Duchess began without preamble. I will speak plainly. The name of Wetherby has stood untarnished for 2 centuries. Now, in a matter of weeks, it has been dragged through the mud. I have endured whispers in every parlour and salon, all because of your foolish entanglement. It was not foolish, Edmund said. Then it was selfish. You could have ended this quietly, but instead you paraded that woman through a ballroom. Lydia flinched at the word. Edmund stepped forward. Enough. You may insult me, but not her. Beatrice spoke then, her tone smooth as glass. Forgive her, Your Grace. She does not mean offence. We all understand you've been misled by affection. Edmund turned on her. Misled? You forged letters in my name. You sent men after her. You hounded an innocent woman because she threatened your vanity. Beatrice's eyes glittered. Careful, Edmund. Accusations spoken in anger can wound more than scandal. They can also reveal truth, he said. The Duchess raised a hand. Enough of this bickering. Edmund, tell me, do you mean to claim this child as your own? I do. Beatrice gave a short laugh. Then you're mad. The Duchess's face hardened. You realize what that means. To acknowledge an illegitimate child, publicly, is to forfeit alliances, influence, even your seat in the Lords. No family of rank will trust you again. I trust myself, he said quietly, for the first time in my life. The Duchess looked at Lydia, her gaze cold. And what do you expect from him, Miss Clark? Marriage? Title? I assure you, you will have neither. Lydia took a slow breath. I expect nothing from you, Your Grace. I only wish to raise my son in peace. Your son? The Duchess repeated, voice sharp. You mean our family's disgrace? Edmund's voice rose. He's my blood. And if that is disgrace, then so be it. Beatrice stepped forward, her tone almost pleading. Edmund, think. You could still undo this. Issue a denial. Say she deceived you. Everyone would believe it. They already think her ambitious. Lydia's chin lifted. I will not be your convenient lie. Beatrice turned to the Duchess. You see, she will ruin him. She's already begun. The Duchess looked from one to the other, her composure trembling for the first time. Edmund, listen to reason. End this before it's too late. He shook his head. It's already too late for reason. There's only truth left. The Duchess's hands tightened on the back of a chair. Then you leave me no choice. If you persist in this madness, I will have your name stricken from the family trust. Do it, he said. I'd rather lose fortune than integrity. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then Beatrice said softly, He's throwing his life away for you, Miss Clark. Do you truly wish to see him destroyed? Lydia swallowed, forcing her voice to stay steady. I never asked him to choose me. He does so of his own will. Because he's blind, Beatrice said. You've made him sentimental. And you, Edmund said sharply, have made him ashamed. The Duchess stepped between them, her tone icy again. Enough. This quarrel ends tonight. Edmund, you will go to your study and draft a statement denying the rumours. Lady Ashcombe will assist you in phrasing it properly. Miss Clark will depart this house at once. I will do no such thing, he said. The Duchess's eyes flashed. You forget yourself. No, Edmund said. For the first time I remember who I am. He turned to Lydia. You and Thomas are my family now. The words hung in the air, heavier than stone. Lydia's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to tell him not to say more, but it was too late. The Duchess's face went pale. You intend to marry her? Yes. Beatrice let out a short, incredulous laugh. You cannot be serious. I am. Beatrice took a step toward him, her voice rising. You would marry beneath you? For pity? For some foolish notion of redemption? For love, he said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the fire seemed to still. Then the Duchess spoke, her voice breaking for the first time. You are my only son. If you do this, you will not be welcome in this house again. Edmund's gaze softened, but he did not falter. Then I will build another. The Duchess turned away, her shoulders rigid. Beatrice, realizing her victory had slipped beyond reach, gathered her skirts. You'll regret this, she hissed. When the world turns its back on you, remember tonight. Perhaps the world should turn, he replied. She left without another word, the echo of her heels fading down the corridor. The Duchess remained silent for a long while, staring into the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. Go then, Edmund. You've chosen your path. He bowed his head once, then offered his arm to Lydia. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. Together, they walked toward the door. The Duchess did not look after them. Outside, the rain had eased, the air cool and damp. Edmund helped Lydia into the carriage and climbed in beside her. Neither spoke until the gates of Wetherby closed behind them. At last, Lydia said softly, "You've lost everything." "Not everything," he said. "I have you. I have him." Her eyes glistened in the faint light. "You'll hate me for this one day." "Never." She turned her face away, unable to bear the tenderness in his voice. As the carriage rolled toward the city, Edmund leaned back and closed his eyes. "Tomorrow," he murmured. "I'll make it right. I'll tell the world myself." "You mean to speak publicly?" "Yes. If I must burn my name to free you, I will." Lydia's hands clenched in her lap. "You can't fight them all. I can try." She looked out the window, watching the fields blur past. "What will happen to her? Beatrice?" His tone was cold. "She'll find another game to play. She always does. And your mother? She'll come around. She loves me, even if pride blinds her." They rode in silence after that, each lost in thought. When they reached London, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. Edmund helped Lydia out and led her into the house on Kensington Lane. Dr. Linton met them at the door, eyes filled with quiet understanding. "You've done a brave thing, Your Grace," he said. "Foolish, perhaps," Edmund replied. "Bravery often looks that way at first." Lydia went upstairs to check on Thomas, who slept peacefully in his cradle. She bent to kiss his forehead, whispering, "We're safe, my love, for now." But as she turned, she saw Edmund in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. "What is it?" she asked. He held a folded letter, the seal broken. "It was waiting for me here, no signature." She took it from him and read aloud the single line written in precise, familiar handwriting. "You think you've won, but by morning, London will know everything." The letter trembled in Lydia's hand. The words were few, but they carried the weight of dread. By morning, London would know everything. She looked at Edmund, whose expression had hardened into grim resolve. "Beatrice," he said quietly, "she means to destroy us before we can even speak." Lydia tried to think clearly, but fear clouded her mind. "What can we do? If she tells her story first, no one will believe ours." He turned toward the window. The dawn light was just breaking over the rooftops. "Then we won't wait until morning. We'll go now to the papers, to Parliament, anywhere they'll listen. I'll tell them myself." She stepped closer, clutching his arm. "You'll be ridiculed. They'll call you dishonorable." "Let them," he said. "I've lived long enough behind silence. It's time the truth had a voice." He called for his coachman, giving orders in a tone that left no room for argument. Lydia wrapped Thomas in his blanket, her fingers trembling as she fastened the ties. The baby stirred, then settled against her shoulder, warm and safe in her arms. They rode through the waking city, past milk carts and street sweepers, the wheels splashing through puddles left by the night's rain. London smelled of coal smoke and bread ovens, of life beginning again, indifferent to scandal or sorrow. When they reached the offices of the Morning Gazette, Edmund stepped out first and helped Lydia down. The editor, a short, spectacled man named Mr. Rainsford, met them at the door. His eyes widened when he recognized the Duke of Wetherby. "Your Grace." "To what do I owe?" "To honesty," Edmund said. "I have a statement to make." Rainsford led them to a small office cluttered with papers and inkpots. "You understand, sir," he said cautiously, "that whatever you say here will be in print before the day's end." "That's precisely my intention." He dictated slowly, his voice steady. "I, Edmund Hawthorne, Duke of Wetherby, hereby acknowledge Lydia Clark as the woman I love and the mother of my son. The rumors are true. The child is mine. I will marry her, regardless of the cost." The editor's quill hesitated mid-stroke. "Your Grace, are you certain? Once this is published, there is no going back." Edmund nodded. "There was no going back the moment I saw her again." Lydia stood beside him, silent but unyielding. The editor looked between them, then dipped his quill again. "Very well, it will appear in the morning edition. Today," Edmund said firmly. "I want it printed today." Rainsford hesitated, then rang for a messenger. "We'll do what we can." When they left the office, the air felt different, heavier, almost expectant. Lydia said nothing as they climbed back into the carriage. Edmund finally turned to her. "Are you angry?" She shook her head. "No, only afraid." He reached for her hand. "So am I." They drove in silence for a long time. The streets grew busier as morning brightened, filled with carriages and gossiping passers-by. Somewhere, Beatrice was likely sipping her tea, readying her own version of the story. But Edmund's declaration would reach the city first. By noon, the first copies of the Morning Gazette were sold on every corner. The headline caught eyes immediately: "A Duke's Confession, the truth behind the scandal of Wetherby." Within an hour, the city was buzzing. Servants carried the news to kitchens, clerks whispered in corridors, and noble ladies nearly dropped their teacups as they read the words aloud. At Wetherby House, the Duchess sat in her parlour, surrounded by newspapers. Her hand shook as she reached the end of the article. Then she lowered the paper and stared into the distance. Her lady's maid hovered near the door. "Your Grace, leave me," the Duchess said quietly. Meanwhile, in her grand townhouse, Lady Beatrice Ashcombe read the same article with disbelief that quickly turned to fury. She crumpled the paper in her hands and threw it into the fire. "He's made himself a martyr," she muttered. "And a saint." Her companion, a nervous cousin, spoke timidly. "What will you do, Beatrice?" "What I must," she said. "If he thinks a newspaper can erase his shame, he's a greater fool than I thought." Back in Kensington, Edmund and Lydia stayed behind drawn curtains, listening to the city's distant hum. The hours passed with agonizing slowness. Edmund paced while Lydia rocked Thomas, her nerves fraying. A knock startled them both. It was Dr. Linton's servant, carrying a sealed envelope. "Delivered by hand, Your Grace. No name given." Edmund took it, broke the seal, and read aloud. "You've made your choice, Edmund. Now face its consequence. Tonight, Wetherby House demands your presence before the family council. Come if you have courage." Lydia swallowed hard. "Your mother." "Yes." "Will you go?" He folded the note carefully. "I must. She's still my mother, whatever name she calls me by." Lydia hesitated. "Then I'll come too." He turned to her. "No. Stay here with Thomas. I don't know what awaits me there." She rose, her voice steady. "If they mean to judge you, they'll judge me as well. We face it together." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Together, then." That evening, the carriage returned once more to Wetherby House. The lamps along the drive burned brighter than usual, and the windows glowed with light. Inside, the Duchess waited in the grand hall, flanked by 3 older men, relatives of Edmund's, solemn and severe. "Mother," he greeted her quietly. "You summoned me." She inclined her head. "And you came, though I half expected you would not. You've made a spectacle of our family." I told the truth. One man's truth is another's ruin. The eldest of the men, Lord Greaves, spoke sternly. "Your Grace, by your own admission you have brought disgrace upon your title. The council must determine whether you remain fit to hold it." Edmund's voice was calm. "My worth is not decided by titles or councils." The Duchess's composure trembled. "You would abandon centuries of heritage for this woman?" He looked at Lydia beside him, her head high, though her hands were shaking. "Yes, without hesitation." Lord Greaves frowned. "You have left us little choice, then. The estates will pass to your cousin until such time as you restore the family's honour." "Which is to say," the Duchess added, "until you renounce this alliance." Lydia found her voice. "You ask him to deny his own child?" The Duchess turned her cold gaze on her. "I ask him to act as a gentleman, not as a man led by folly." Edmund's voice cut through the air. "Enough. My decision is final. If the price of decency is exile, I'll pay it." The Duchess rose, her face pale with restrained emotion. "Then go, Edmund. Leave this house as you chose to leave your station. From this night forward, the title of Wetherby means nothing to you." He bowed slightly. "Very well." He turned to go, but Lydia lingered, looking back at the Duchess. "He may no longer be the Duke of Wetherby," she said softly, "but he will always be more honourable than any who hide behind that name." The Duchess's eyes glistened, though she said nothing. Outside, the night air was cold and still. Edmund exhaled, shoulders sagging as though a great weight had lifted, and yet left him hollow. "It's done," he said. Lydia slipped her hand into his. "You did what you had to." He looked at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "We did." They returned to Kensington under a silvered moon. Inside, Thomas slept peacefully. For the first time in weeks, Lydia allowed herself a fragile sense of relief. The scandal was open, the truth spoken. There was nothing left to hide. But as Edmund poured himself a glass of brandy, a sharp knock came at the door. Dr. Linton entered, pale and breathless. "Your Grace," he said quickly, then caught himself. "Forgive me." "Mr. Hawthorne, perhaps I should say." Edmund set down the glass. "What is it?" The doctor hesitated, his eyes darting to Lydia. "You should sit down. Tell me." "It's about Lady Ashcombe," Linton said quietly. "She was found unconscious in her home an hour ago. A letter lies on her desk addressed to you." Lydia gasped. "Is she—" "She's alive," the doctor said, "but barely. The note suggests she took a heavy dose of laudanum." Edmund stared at him in shock. "She wrote to me?" "Yes. The messenger waits outside with the letter." Lydia's voice trembled. "Don't read it tonight. You've been through too much." But Edmund reached for the folded paper the doctor offered. The seal was smudged, the handwriting faint but unmistakable. He broke it open and his eyes moved over the lines quickly. Then his hand fell to his side, the paper fluttering from his grasp. Lydia caught it before it reached the floor, her eyes scanning the final words written in a shaking hand. "If you will not have me, then let the scandal die with me. Tomorrow the world will mourn a foolish woman. Farewell." For a long moment, no one in the room spoke. The letter trembled in Lydia's hands. Edmund stood motionless, staring at nothing, as if the words were still echoing inside him. Dr. Linton broke the silence first. "We managed to revive her for now, but she's weak. The apothecary fears she may not last the night." Edmund turned toward him slowly. "Where is she?" "At her London townhouse. A nurse watches her, but she keeps asking for you." Lydia swallowed hard. "You can't go, Edmund." He met her gaze, his face drawn. "How can I not? Whatever she's done, I can't let her die believing I wished her gone." "After everything," Lydia's voice shook, "she hunted us. She nearly took our child from me." "I know," he said quietly. "But hatred has taken enough already," she wanted to argue, to remind him of every wound Beatrice had caused. But something in his tone silenced her. He looked like a man haunted by duty, not affection. "Then I'll come with you," she said. He shook his head. "No. Stay here with Thomas. If she dies, her house will be swarmed by reporters before morning. I won't have you near that." Lydia hesitated, torn between fear and understanding. Finally, she nodded. "Promise you'll come back before dawn." "I will," he said, and left. The city was unnaturally quiet that night, the fog thick along the streets. When Edmund reached Lady Ashcombe's townhouse, 2 servants met him at the door, their faces pale. They led him upstairs, where a faint light glowed from behind a half-closed door. Beatrice lay in a grand bed, her hair loose around her shoulders. The scent of laudanum hung heavy in the air. Her eyes flickered open when she heard his step. "You came," she whispered. "Yes," he said, sitting beside her. "Why did you do this?" She smiled faintly. "Because I lost." "You didn't have to lose," he said. "You could have chosen peace." Her gaze drifted to the window. "Peace is for the good." "I have never been good, Edmund. You must know that by now." He took her hand. It felt cold, fragile as paper. "You weren't evil either. Just wounded. Wounded people wound others," she murmured. "That's what I've learned too late." He wanted to tell her to rest, to stop speaking, but she went on. "You loved her in a way you never could have loved me. I saw it the moment she entered a room. You became alive around her. Do you know how that feels? To be invisible beside someone else's light?" He looked away, pain tightening his throat. "Beatrice, don't pity me," she said. "I don't deserve it. I wrote those letters because I wanted you to suffer as I did. I wanted to see her broken, so you would come back to me. But instead, I broke myself. You can still make it right," he said gently. "Tell the truth, Beatrice. Clear her name. Clear your own." Her eyelids fluttered. "They wouldn't believe me. They'd call it delirium. But you, if you forgive me, perhaps that will be enough." "I forgive you," he said, and meant it. "Rest now." She smiled faintly, as if a great weight had lifted. "Then perhaps I can sleep." Her hand relaxed in his, her breathing shallow but even. He sat there until the first hint of dawn touched the curtains, then rose quietly. As he reached the door, the nurse approached. "She'll live," the woman said softly. "Barely, but she will." Edmund nodded, relief and sadness mingling. "Let me know when she wakes again." He stepped out into the morning fog. The first newspapers were being delivered. He could see the boys calling headlines down the street. His name was everywhere now, tangled with Lydia's. But for the first time, he felt no shame. Back in Kensington, Lydia had not slept. She sat by the fire with Thomas in her arms, listening to every sound in the hall. When the door finally opened and Edmund entered, she rose quickly. "You're safe," she whispered. He nodded. "She's alive. For now." "What did she say?" He hesitated, then said quietly that she wanted forgiveness. Lydia's expression softened. "Did you give it?" "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Then it's finished." "Almost," he said. "The world still watches. They'll want more than forgiveness. They'll want a spectacle." "Then let them watch," she said. "We've nothing left to hide." Later that morning, Dr. Linton brought a letter from the Duchess. Lydia held her breath as Edmund broke the seal. "My son," he read aloud, "I have seen what the world writes of you, and I have seen what the world says of me. You were right. Pride has blinded me too long. If you can forgive your mother, come home, not as a duke, but as my child." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "She's asking you back." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps we've all learned something from Beatrice." That afternoon, they travelled once more to Wetherby House. The rain had stopped, and sunlight cut through the clouds, lighting the familiar drive. The Duchess awaited them in the same grand hall where she had once banished him. This time her expression was softer. "Lydia," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology." "You owe me nothing, Your Grace," Lydia replied. "On the contrary," the Duchess said, "I wronged you. I let the world's opinion weigh more than decency. I see now that you have given my son what neither title nor wealth could." "Honor," Lydia's voice wavered. "All I gave him was a reason to be hated." The Duchess shook her head. "No, you gave him something to live for." She turned to Edmund. "Your father would have been proud of you. Foolish, perhaps, but proud." He smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a blessing." The Duchess sighed. "If you mean to marry her, do it quickly. The papers will move on soon enough, and scandal fades faster than people think." Lydia blinked in disbelief. "You would give us your blessing?" The Duchess nodded once. "I would rather see my son happy in disgrace than miserable in respectability." Emotion tightened Edmund's throat. "Thank you, Mother. Go," she said, turning away before her composure failed. "Before I change my mind." Outside, the afternoon sun shone bright and clean. Lydia looked at Edmund, uncertain whether to laugh or cry. Was that truly her blessing? "It was as close as she'll ever come," he said, smiling. They rode back to Kensington in silence, hearts lighter than they had been in months. For the first time the future seemed possible. By evening a soft knock sounded at the door. Dr. Linton entered again, carrying a sealed letter. "From Lady Ashcombe," he said quietly. "She asked me to deliver it personally." Lydia exchanged a look with Edmund. He broke the seal and began to read aloud. "Edmund, I will leave England for a time. I need distance to remember who I was before ambition turned me cruel. Tell Miss Clark she has nothing to fear from me. I will never speak of this again. May your child grow in peace, and may your name outlive the gossip that tried to bury it. Beatrice." Lydia exhaled slowly. "She's truly gone, then?" "Yes," Edmund said softly, "at last." The days that followed were quiet. The scandal began to fade, replaced by new rumours and fresh gossip. In coffee houses and drawing rooms, their story turned from outrage to fascination, from scandal to sympathy. Yet Lydia and Edmund paid little attention. They spent their mornings walking through Kensington Gardens with Thomas, their afternoons reading or talking by the fire. The peace felt fragile, but it was theirs. One morning, a familiar figure appeared at their gate. The Duchess, dressed simply, without her usual retinue. She looked at Thomas with cautious wonder. "May I?" she asked. Lydia hesitated, then placed the child in her arms. The Duchess held him awkwardly, then smiled despite herself. "He has your eyes, Edmund." "And her will," Edmund said, glancing at Lydia. The Duchess looked between them, a small tear slipping down her cheek. "You've done what I could not. You've made peace with the world." Lydia touched her arm gently. "Perhaps it's not too late for you to do the same." The Duchess nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps not." For a while they stood together, the three of them, bound not by bloodlines or scandal, but by something quieter, understanding. When the Duchess left, the garden was filled with birdsong. Lydia turned to Edmund. "Do you think it's over?" He looked toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set. "I think it's beginning," she smiled. "Then let it begin." But before she could take his hand, a knock sounded at the door once more. Dr. Linton's servant entered hurriedly, breathless. "Forgive the intrusion, sir. There's been another letter. This one from the Bishop of Canterbury himself." Edmund frowned. "The bishop?" "Yes, sir. He requests your presence at the cathedral tomorrow morning. He says it concerns the legality of your intended marriage." Lydia's smile faded. "The legality?" The servant nodded nervously. "He writes that questions have been raised about the child's baptism, and whether a union between you and Miss Clark would be recognized by the church." Edmund exchanged a sharp glance with Lydia, tension flooding back like a tide. He took the letter from the servant's hand, broke the seal and began to read. After a moment, his face went still. Lydia stepped closer, her heart pounding. "What does it say?" He looked up at her, his voice low. "It says our marriage cannot proceed until certain matters of lineage are clarified, because someone has questioned whether Thomas is truly my son." Lydia's hands went cold. "Questioned?" she whispered. "By whom?" Edmund refolded the letter slowly, as if delaying the truth. "It doesn't say. Only that the church received a formal complaint. They claim there's uncertainty regarding Thomas's parentage, and therefore my right to legitimize him through marriage." Her voice trembled. "Uncertainty? That's impossible. You saw him. Everyone who looks at him sees you." "I know." Edmund's tone was firm but weary. "But appearances are not evidence to those who live by rules and signatures." She sank into a chair, her breath uneven. "So after everything, after truth, confession, scandal, they still want to measure us by paper and ink." He knelt before her, taking her hands. "Listen to me. This is not the end. I'll speak to the bishop myself. If there's doubt, I'll erase it." She looked at him helplessly. "And if they refuse, then we'll marry without their blessing." She shook her head. "That would destroy your last shred of reputation. You'd lose even the sympathy you've earned." He smiled faintly. "I thought you said we had nothing left to lose." Before she could reply, a knock came at the door. Dr. Linton entered, his expression troubled. "Forgive me, Edmund. I heard from a colleague that the bishop received his complaint from an anonymous letter." "Anonymous," Edmund repeated. "Yes, but it carried convincing details. Dates, names, the exact time Miss Clark left Weatherby Hall." The doctor hesitated. "Someone close to the family must have written it." Lydia stood quickly. "Beatrice?" Edmund shook his head. "She swore in her last letter that she'd never speak of us again." "Then who?" Lydia asked. No one answered. Dr. Linton finally said, "You have an appointment tomorrow at the cathedral. Be cautious. The bishop is a good man, but the church fears public embarrassment more than sin itself." When he left, silence settled over the room. Lydia went to the window, her reflection pale against the glass. "Do you think your mother—" "No," Edmund interrupted. "She would never stoop to lies." But doubt flickered in his eyes, and Lydia saw it. If she cannot forgive the scandal, perhaps she believes she's protecting the family name. He said nothing. That night, neither slept. Lydia lay awake listening to the clock, her thoughts circling endlessly. By dawn she rose quietly, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and went downstairs. Edmund was already there, staring into the dying embers of the fire. "You haven't slept," she said softly. "Nor have you." He poured her a cup of tea, though neither of them drank it. "I've been thinking," he said. "If the bishop wishes proof, then proof he shall have. I'll bring witnesses, Dr. Linton the innkeeper, even my own servants who remember the day you left." "And if they call me a liar," she asked, "then I'll be one beside you." They arrived at the cathedral as morning bells echoed through the square. The bishop, a tall man with kind eyes and tired hands, received them in his private study. "Your Grace, Mr. Hawthorne, I should say, you understand why we are here." "I understand someone questions my son's legitimacy," Edmund said calmly. "I wish to know who dares such slander." The bishop's tone was measured. The letter was unsigned, but its contents suggest access to personal knowledge. It claims the child was born before the time Miss Clark could have conceived under your roof. Lydia's face flushed with anger. "That's false." "I believe you," the bishop said gently, "but the church must investigate before granting its blessing." Edmund stepped forward. "Then investigate. Ask me what you will." The bishop glanced at Lydia. "The letter also says Miss Clark sought refuge in the north soon after leaving Weatherby. Do you confirm this?" Yes, she said. I fled to Hertfordshire, then to York. And during that time, did the Duke visit you? No. He found me only months later. The bishop nodded slowly. Then the child was conceived before your departure. She hesitated only a heartbeat. Yes. Edmund looked at her with quiet pride. And I will swear to the same. The bishop sighed. Such testimony binds your honor, not the church's law, but... He paused, studying their faces. Your sincerity speaks louder than scandal. I will need time to verify your accounts. If the truth is as you say, the marriage will proceed. Lydia felt her knees weaken with relief. Thank you. As they left the cathedral, Edmund turned to her. This isn't finished. Whoever wrote that letter will not stop until they see us undone. She nodded. But we'll face it together. The next days passed in uneasy calm. Rumors of the bishop's inquiry reached society, reigniting whispers they had hoped buried. Servants spoke cautiously. Friends sent polite notes of concern. Lydia endured it all in silence, tending to Thomas and waiting for news. On the fourth morning, a carriage appeared at the gate. The Duchess stepped out alone, her veil drawn. Lydia met her in the parlour. I suppose you've heard, the Duchess said. Yes, Lydia replied carefully. I came because I thought perhaps you would speak honestly with me, woman to woman. Tell me, are you certain of the child's father? Lydia's breath caught. Your Grace, how can you ask that? Because the Church asks it, the Duchess said softly. And because if they find otherwise, Edmund will lose everything. The estates, the name, he will be stripped of all that's left to him. Lydia's eyes filled with tears. And you think saving his title matters more than truth? The Duchess looked away. I think sometimes truth destroys more than lies. Lydia drew herself upright. Then you do not know your son. He would rather be ruined than false. The Duchess's shoulders sagged. He is his father's son, too proud to bend. She turned toward the door. I only pray you are not mistaken. When she left, Lydia sank into a chair, shaking. The words echoed in her mind. I pray you are not mistaken. That evening, Edmund returned from meeting the bishop again. He has finished his inquiry, he said. He believes us, but he insists on one final confirmation. A document from the registry where Thomas was baptized. They must match the dates. Lydia frowned. His baptism was done in York, under the name Turner. Yes. The bishop wrote to request the record. When it arrives, this ordeal will end. Days later, the letter came. Edmund broke the seal in front of Lydia, his expression unreadable as he scanned the paper. Her heart pounded. What does it say? He read aloud slowly. The parish register confirms baptism of one Thomas Turner, born to Lydia Turner, mother unmarried. Date, May 2nd, 1887. Lydia gasped. That's wrong. He was born in April. Edmund read on, his voice tightening. And further notes state the mother declared the father's name as Charles Turner, deceased. Lydia covered her mouth. I never said that. The vicar must have misunderstood me. I gave no father's name. I swear it. He took her hand quickly. I believe you. The record can be corrected. But they'll see it as proof, she said. They'll say I invented the story. Then we'll go to York ourselves, Edmund said. We'll speak to the vicar, and he will confirm the mistake. The following morning, they set out for York, Thomas bundled safely beside them. The journey was long and tense. Lydia stared out the window, her thoughts heavy. At last, the carriage stopped before the small stone church where she had once sought refuge. The vicar, a grey-haired man with kind eyes, greeted them politely but stiffly. Edmund wasted no time. You baptized a child here 6 months ago, Thomas Turner. Do you remember? The vicar nodded. Yes, I recall. A young mother, alone. She seemed frightened. And the record you made, Edmund said. It names a father. Where did you get that name? The vicar frowned. She did not speak it, but a man who accompanied her gave it to me. Lydia froze. A man? Yes, the vicar said. He arrived just before the service, said he was your kinsman, there to stand witness. He signed the register. Edmund's voice sharpened. His name? I believe it was Mr. Collins. Lydia blinked, remembering the innkeeper from Hertfordshire, the man who had smiled too often and asked too many questions. She whispered, he was Beatrice's servant. Edmund's face darkened. Then even her silence reached beyond her promise. The vicar, sensing the storm between them, said gently, If there has been an error, I will amend it. You have my word. When they left the church, Lydia's strength faltered. Will this ever end? Yes, Edmund said. When truth leaves no more shadows. As they climbed back into the carriage, a boy ran toward them, waving a folded paper. For you, sir, he called, delivered to the rectory this morning. Edmund took it, frowning. The seal bore no crest, only a single initial, B. He opened it and read in silence. Lydia watched his face pale, his hand tightening on the page. Edmund, she said, her voice barely a whisper. What does it say? He looked at her slowly, the wind tugging at the paper. It says Beatrice Ashcombe is dead. The carriage jolted as the wheels struck uneven cobblestones. Lydia held Thomas close while Edmund sat beside her, the letter from York still open in his hand. Beatrice was dead. The words seemed unreal, hollow, as if they belonged to someone else's story. The rain fell harder, streaking the windows, and the sound filled the silence between them. She finally spoke. Did it say how? Edmund's voice was low. Her carriage overturned on the road to the coast. They say it was an accident. She was traveling alone. Lydia's chest tightened. After everything, she found no peace. He looked out the window, his tone quiet and heavy. She sought it too late. But perhaps now she'll have it. They drove on in silence, the rain easing into a steady drizzle. When they reached London the next day, the city was already whispering. News of Lady Ashcombe's death filled every drawing room. Some pitied her, others called it justice. Edmund and Lydia said nothing. They returned to their modest home in Kensington, where Thomas greeted them with a laugh that cut through the gloom like sunlight through fog. That laugh reminded Edmund what truly mattered. He knelt by the cradle, brushing his fingers over the child's dark hair. He has your strength, he said softly. And your stubbornness. Lydia smiled faintly. Then heaven help you both. He looked up at her, the fatigue of months falling away from his face. It's over, Lydia. The lies, the pursuit, the fear. It all ends now. The church will have no reason to delay us. The bishop will bless our marriage, and we'll begin again. She searched his face, half afraid to believe it. Do you think they'll allow it now? Yes, he said firmly. And even if they do not, we'll marry under God's sky, with or without their approval. Her lips trembled, not from fear but from relief. She took his hand and kissed it gently. You would do that for me? I'd do far more, he said. I'd do anything. That evening the bishop's messenger arrived. The letter he carried bore the church seal and a single sentence written in the bishop's own hand. The matter of legitimacy is resolved. May the union proceed in peace and truth. Lydia read it twice before the words sank in, her eyes filled with tears. Edmund took the letter from her trembling hand, smiled, and whispered, At last. They were married 1 week later. The ceremony took place in the same cathedral where they had once faced judgment. The bishop himself presided, his voice gentle and measured, as sunlight streamed through the high-stained glass. A small gathering attended. Dr. Linton, the Duchess, a few loyal friends, and the village innkeepers, who had known Lydia when she was only a frightened mother with nowhere to go. She wore a simple gown of ivory silk, nothing like the lavish dresses of nobility. Edmund thought she had never looked more beautiful. When she reached him at the altar, her hands were steady, her gaze clear. Do you, Edmund Hawthorne, take Lydia Clark? I do, he said before the bishop could finish. The small crowd laughed softly. And do you, Lydia Clark, take Edmund Hawthorne? She smiled, tears glimmering. With all my heart. When the bishop declared them husband and wife, Edmund lifted her hands to his lips. The world seemed to fall away. The scandals, the whispers, the loneliness. And there was only this moment, pure and certain. Afterward, outside the cathedral steps, the Duchess took Lydia's hands in hers. Welcome to the family, she said quietly, and forgive an old woman her pride. Lydia squeezed her hands. It was never pride I feared, Your Grace, only losing his love. The Duchess's expression softened. You never will. He is his father's son, but his heart belongs to you. Dr. Linton approached then, smiling broadly. Well, this will give the papers a new story, one worth printing. Edmund laughed. Let them write what they please. I've given them enough truth to fill a lifetime. That evening, they returned to Kensington, where the staff had prepared a small supper and the hearth glowed warmly. Thomas was already asleep upstairs. Lydia walked through the quiet rooms, her gown brushing softly over the floor, and felt peace settle around her like a gentle cloak. Edmund followed her to the window. "Do you remember," he said, "the first time I saw you at Weatherby Hall? You were teaching my sister French verbs. You dropped your book, and I thought, there is a woman who will never bow to anyone." She smiled. "And you looked at me as if I were a puzzle you meant to solve. Did I solve it?" "Not yet," she said softly. "But you've come close." He touched her cheek, tracing the line of her jaw. "I thought love was something to be controlled, like a horse or a title. You taught me it's something to be trusted instead." She leaned into his touch. "And you taught me that forgiveness is not weakness. It's the only way to survive." He kissed her then, slow and deep, the kiss of a man who had walked through every kind of storm and finally found shore. She wrapped her arms around him, resting her head against his shoulder, and for a long time neither spoke. The following days passed in a kind of quiet joy. The newspapers, once cruel, now praised the Duke who had chosen love over lineage. Society, quick to condemn, was just as quick to admire courage when it cost them nothing. Invitations arrived from families who had once shunned them, but Edmund declined most. "We've danced enough for other people," he told Lydia. "Now we'll live for ourselves." They spent their mornings walking through Hyde Park, Thomas bundled in his pram, his laughter echoing like bells. Strangers smiled at the sight, the disgraced Duke and his lady, now a picture of simple happiness. Lydia found contentment in the small things, the sound of Thomas's first word, the warmth of Edmund's hand as they walked, the way the city seemed gentler now that it no longer frightened her. One afternoon, as spring began to bloom, they visited Weatherby Hall. The great estate had been empty for months, the windows shuttered, the gardens wild with neglect. The Duchess waited at the door to greet them, her expression unreadable. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. Edmund smiled faintly. "It's still home, Mother, whether I bear the title or not." She led them inside. The hall smelled of old wood and lavender polish, just as Lydia remembered. Sunlight streamed across the marble floor. "I've decided," the Duchess said, "that Weatherby belongs to Thomas one day. It's time the name stands for something new." Edmund blinked, astonished. "You mean it?" "Yes," she said. "Let him grow up where his father did, but free of the ghosts that burdened us all." Lydia's throat tightened. "He will know kindness before he knows duty. I promise you that." The Duchess smiled, a real smile, one Lydia had never seen before. "Then perhaps the Weatherby line is not cursed after all." They spent the day walking through the gardens, restoring memories once painful to something gentler. When evening came, they dined together by the fire, and laughter replaced the awkward silences of old. Before they left, the Duchess took Lydia aside. "I misjudged you. I thought you sought to steal what was never yours, but you've given my son more peace than all his ancestors combined. For that, you have my gratitude." Lydia touched her hand lightly. "You gave him life. I only gave him reason to live it." When they returned to London, the city greeted them not with scandal, but celebration. Their story had become legend, a tale of redemption that filled column after column. Children sold printed sketches of them on the streets, titled, "The Duke Who Chose Love." Edmund found the attention amusing. "At least they spell our names correctly now," he said, laughing. Months passed, and the world moved on. Beatrice's name faded from gossip. Her house sold quietly to distant relatives. The Duchess visited often, doting on Thomas more than anyone expected. Dr. Linton became godfather to the boy, proudly declaring him the happiest infant in London. Lydia's life settled into a rhythm of small joys. She spent her mornings teaching Thomas to walk across the garden path, her afternoons reading by the fire while Edmund worked at his desk, writing letters to the estates that still bore his influence. Sometimes when he looked up from his writing, he would find her watching him. "What are you thinking?" he'd ask. "That I once thought I would never see you again," she'd say. "And now I cannot imagine a day without you." He would smile. "Then let's make certain there are many more." That summer they decided to hold a garden fete for their friends and neighbors, a celebration not of titles, but of new beginnings. The lawns were filled with laughter, music, and children chasing one another through the roses. Even the Duchess danced once, to everyone's astonishment. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, and Edmund led Lydia to the center of the lawn. The guests stepped aside, watching with warm smiles as the couple began to dance. The air smelled of roses and candle wax. "You know," Edmund said, twirling her gently, "when I first asked you to dance, you refused me." She laughed. "You were too proud then. You would have stepped on my toes. And now?" "Now you're still proud," she teased, "but at least you've learned to listen to the rhythm." He drew her closer, their foreheads touching. "Then listen with me," he whispered. The music slowed, and the world faded to quiet. Lydia felt his heartbeat against hers, steady and sure. She thought of everything they had endured, the heartbreak, the fear, the forgiveness, and how it had brought them to this moment. When the last note lingered in the air, Edmund lifted her chin and kissed her softly. The guests cheered, but neither of them heard. Later that night, after the lanterns had burned low and the last guest had gone, they stood together by the window overlooking the quiet garden. The moonlight spilled across the floor, pale and silver. Lydia rested her head against his chest. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "All we lost?" He shook his head. "We lost nothing worth keeping. Everything we have now is real." She smiled against him. "And what do we have now?" He kissed her hair. "A son, a home, peace, and you." Her voice softened. "And you, Edmund, always you." Outside, the wind stirred the roses, and their scent drifted through the open window. Thomas stirred in his cradle, murmured in his sleep, and then was still again. Edmund turned off the last of the lamps. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll take him to Wetherby again. I want him to see where his father and mother found their courage. And where they found love," she added. He smiled. "Yes, especially that." They stood together in the quiet, the moonlight falling over them, two shadows joined as one. The years ahead waited like an unopened book, full of laughter and the ordinary miracles of love. Lydia looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Do you think the world will ever stop talking about us?" He laughed softly. "Let them talk. We've already written the ending ourselves." And he kissed her again, the kind of kiss that promised forever as the morning light began to rise over London and a new day began. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.